Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Style to Impact Live. If you are here live, thank you very much for joining me. If you are watching the replay, thank you very much for coming back and listening to today's conversation. I'm super excited for today's conversation and the guest that I have today. Before I start any of these conversations, I like to start with a wellness check-in so that we take a moment to pause, to reflect, to center ourselves, to see how we're feeling, and of course, what is it that you need to intentionally show up for yourself. So if you're here live, let me know in the chat how you're feeling, how's your week going, and if you are watching the replay, I would love to hear from you as well. So let me know in the comments. If you're new to this space, I'm Salida Roberts. I'm the founder of Style to Impact, and I truly believe that representation is not just you being in the room or having a seat at the table, but it's definitely also how you show up. As you might have been aware, I'm doing for the rest of this month, I'm doing a series called Style Stories. This is where I have conversation with phenomenal women who are joining me as my guests as we unpack some of the narratives that we hold, especially as Black women, when it comes to the way that we show up and the way that we represent ourselves and the stories that we hold surrounding our appearance and what it means to show up in a professional space in order to succeed. And so my guest today, super excited for my guest today, who is, oh my gosh, my soul sister. I see her and I'm like, yes, I wish I can rock the hair like that, but my hair, no behavior, it will not stay like that. So
Oh my
I'm so
God.
excited to have Trish Lindo join me today. She is the senior creative manager at LinkedIn, and I'm gonna say this as well, my creative manager. I'm super blessed and excited to have you as my creative manager, always pushing me to do my best. So welcome, Trish. Thank you for saying yes to today's conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Salida. This is a truly an honor. You are killing it here on LinkedIn and in the style space. So I appreciate you inviting me onto your show. And it's an honor to be your creator manager as well. Anytime I get a chance to spend time with extraordinary women such as yourself, that is a complete gift to me. So thank you.
Thank you very much as well for the work. I appreciate it. And so I want to jump right in because, first of all, you're looking all like, I'm looking at you. I'm like, okay, I think I needed to not blend in with my background today. But I'm trying something new. And part of the conversation and style stories is really dismantling and breaking the biases and the boxes and the norms when it comes to how we show up, right? We're told that we need to look one way to be seen as professional, to be seen as an expert. And this is what I'm doing. I'm defying the norm when it comes to showing up on video. It's also spring. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to add some spring color. It goes with my background, it goes with my theme, and it also
Yes,
makes me feel great, right? So
absolutely.
yeah, and so I love again, I just love how you're showing up. And
Thank
so to
you.
kick off this conversation, I'm gonna go right into it. I am curious, has there ever been a time where you might have minimized or changed certain aspect of yourself to avoid certain biases, like someone talking about your hair, or maybe talking about the way that your accent, the way that you speak, or anything like that? Has there ever been a time that you did that?
Yeah, I think that there is probably not a Black woman alive that has not experienced that in some way, some sort of bias or discrimination for, showing up as themselves, and I am not, immune to that. In terms of my hair, I mean, I think we've all been through hair journeys. I used to have a relaxer. My hair was very straight, much like yours, very long and straight. And I wore it like that for many years.
Yeah.
And then, once I switched over to natural hair, I did get a couple of comments, but I will say this. I mean, for me, my journey was very different because I worked in the entertainment space in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
So there was just a small little opening of that door of that. Most people were like, hey, if that's how you want to look, that's totally fine. So I didn't work like in a traditional corporate
Yeah.
space, that some people may have, dealt with that type of bias,
Yeah.
but, let's say a law office or a bank or something like that, where, there was all eyes on you. The space that I worked in, it was, hey, come as you are, as long as you look great, fine, so
Yeah.
I didn't experience that. But I mean, there were instances where there were a couple of times people were like, oh, your hair, that kind of thing. And you're like, uh-huh. So, but I think in terms of my personal style and fashion, that's one I kept for myself a lot. But I was always mindful of how I showed up,
Okay.
whether it be, different events around Los Angeles that I was attending, is just making sure that I always looked put together. Because I think, as we know, especially as Black women, we don't have the luxury to just be like, oh, I'm just putting on a sweatshirt and,
Yeah.
just, sweatpants, and I'm just going to go and hang out. We don't have that. We need to show up
Whew.
correct and fabulous, just so that we can have the same amount of, not only, in terms of how we feel about ourselves, but just to make sure that we get the same amount of respect as,
Right.
let's say,
Yeah.
as our white counterparts. And, unfortunately, that still goes on. And that is something that is in my mind a lot, when I do show up in spaces, is how will I be perceived? What will people
Mm.
think about me? So I want to make sure that I look very put together. I want to make sure that I feel fabulous, obviously,
Yeah.
but I mean, but I think a large part, I just don't think that we've gotten to a point where we can show up in these spaces completely as our authentic selves. I don't think that exists yet.
And that makes me, I feel sad when I hear that. Like I
Yeah.
truly do feel sad that we don't have the luxury to show up as ourselves and always having to do that, go through that checklist. Am I dressing appropriately? Is my this going to be a conversation? Is this, and just running through that list? And I find most of the times when we're doing that, for most women, or at least the women that I've worked with, because they have to go through that list, it's, you know what, I'm not even going to bother. How is it that this space, or should I show up in this space to be accepted, to be respected? And they lose that part of themselves in the process because they're trying to fit into the narrative, as opposed to holding on to that shred of humanity of who you are and saying, this is who I am. And just kind of listening to what you said, one, not something that you might have experienced on the same level as someone who's working, who's working in finance or any of those traditional fields, but having to check whether or not you are appropriately dressed, or check whether or not you are showing up in a way that you're going to be respected. I want to, if you can, just define what that meant for you. How did you decide on what to wear into those spaces and still staying true to who you are?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, from an early age for me, I've always loved fashion and style and beauty. I loved it, and I
Yeah.
still do. Much like yourself, I'm a personal stylist, as well. And, I love playing with color. I'm Jamaican, so we always got to bring the color, right?
Yeah.
And the fabulous. So I'll start there. So, with that said, I think, at the beginning of my career, I was working in roles where, yeah, I wasn't making that much money. So, I couldn't afford to, wear the best of the best, but I always was very mindful of how I showed up. And I think sometimes how it sort of affected me was, I didn't want it to potentially affect, if I got another job. I didn't want it to affect whether or not my colleagues, looked at me differently, like, oh, what does she have on? That sort of thing. So I made a conscious effort in my mind to basically show up and show out. Like I was always going to show up and
Can
I
we
will.
can we
Yeah.
take a moment there? Show up and show out.
Yes. I was always going to win. I was like, I will show up and I will be the best dressed in this room. So they have nothing to say other than you look nice
Yeah,
or, oh, where did you get that? So I didn't leave any room for doubt. And even when I didn't, have, whether it be designer or the best of the best,
yeah,
I always made sure that I looked really pulled together. I always played with color, because it does look good on our cocoa skin,
yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I always made sure that we did that. But, to this day, I mean, it's still something that I think about. I attend a lot of events and, networking events and professional events. And, you want to make sure you're striking the right accord, but for me as a Black woman, and I'm sure you know this as well, and I'm sure as our guests know as well, is that, sometimes you are the only in the room.
Yeah,
Sometimes you are one of five, if you're
yeah,
lucky, maybe one of 10. And, you want to make sure that, there's no room for doubt of why are you here?
yeah.
How did you get in?
Uh-huh.
That
Yeah,
kind of thing. So, the thought is always, I want to look the part. I belong here, and
yes,
that's unfortunate that I still think like that, but that is the reality of the world that we live in,
yeah,
but I will say this for me personally, it's not internalized in terms of, how I feel about myself or, oh, I'm scared to show up. I know I'm going to look good no matter what. But that thought is always in the back of my mind. Am I going to be okay? Like,
yeah.
long as no one's going to say anything, I should be okay.
What I'm hearing, Trish, this, and I think this is the difference, and I hope that our viewers get this from you, is that you've decided, or you decided very early on. Yes, and let's demystify this. You don't have to wear designer clothing, expensive clothing to look put together. That's not how you look put together. That's not how you represent yourself. But deciding for yourself, how do I want to represent myself? What is the message do I want to send in the spaces that I'm in? And what does this look like in terms of my appearance? What is it I'm going to wear? But yes, we still have to navigate, unfortunately. Oh, am I going to be, but you did not take that, the box that society and the spaces that you're going into, and shrink yourself.
No,
And
absolutely not.
that's key.
Absolutely not. And I don't think that any of us should. We are just extraordinary beings, and Black women will always show up in a way that defies, imagination.
Yeah,
We are fabulous. We are amazing women. So, I never let that dim my light. I think in terms of, how I show up, I know that hey, if you have the means and you want to make sure you are drenched in Gucci or Louis, more power to you. But if that's not the case, especially for those who are just starting their careers, smaller brands, online brands work just fine.
yeah,
A big thing that I do, especially when I have these events to go to, is I try to ask as many questions as possible. What's the dress code for
yeah.
this? You know, and sometimes, some of these events don't even have a dress code listed, and you're like, oh,
What
come
do I?
on. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, because that's also a challenge for most women, and
Absolutely.
and Black women. We're not trying to fit in, but we're trying to show up in the space as ourselves, be appropriately dressed. And sometimes that dress code, and not understanding what the dress code is, can be the make or break between you showing up and showing out, or shrinking to fit, or just like, ooh, hit
Yeah.
and miss. How do you, when there are no dress codes
Mhm.
listed, when they haven't listed like this is the dress code, how do you decide for yourself, okay, this is how I'm going to show up to this event?
Yeah, absolutely. My biggest thing, and we all heard about having the little black dress, right?
Yeah.
I have a few, little black dresses, as we all do, always on standby.
Yeah.
When in doubt, a little black dress works every single time.
I may disagree with you on that, but okay.
True, true. But if you don't know, that is the safest bet. Now, that little black dress could be a little, dress with that's floral or color or something like that, but one that you feel good in, you can also, skirts and slacks and all that. I typically don't wear slacks as much as most people. One thing, and don't tell anybody this, but I'm 5'2", so people think that I'm so much taller. And in my mind, I'm legit 5'10". Like,
Same.
okay,
I keep saying I have short people syndrome. Like I wish I was taller. Hence one of the reasons why I wear heels. Like if I'm going to any
yes,
networking or business event,
yes,
I'm going to be in heels. Like you're 5'2", I'm
yes.
5 feet. On my driver's license says 5'1" because I was like, we're not walking around here being exact
No,
5 feet. Can I get the
right,
1 inch? Like 5 feet 1 inch? But that's it, right? It's how do you show up? And I like how you said and you made that distinction because you search the internet or you hear when in doubt, wear the little black dress, and everybody goes specifically and get a black dress.
right.
It's like the black dress is just a way of saying what is your go-to piece outfit that makes you feel amazing in, right?
Yeah.
And I love about the way that you think about what is that piece or look that makes me feel amazing, and that's the look that I'm going to wear when I don't know what the dress code is. And I remember the first time I was working for this Swiss wealth management company, and the board from Switzerland was going to be there, and a couple other high profile clients were going to be there. And my boss said to me at the time, he said, oh, it's going to be smart casual. I've never heard about smart casual until that point. I was like, smart casual,
Right.
what is that? I'm like, what is that? Like, so I was asking my colleagues, I'm like, what is, and I just started with the company. It's like, what is, they're like, we've never heard that either. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna break it down. Smart casual. So don't dress casual. Make it look like it's elevated, but you're not really dressing in a professional way. So that's
Right.
kind of how I had to deduce it and
Right.
then decide for myself, what do I want to wear that's going to reflect this? And that kind of ties into your little black dress. What will
Yeah.
help me do that? So that's a great, segue into what I wanted to talk about next. And absolutely love your perspective. It's just showing from a different angle, like, okay, I may not have experienced this, but I still have the thought, but I'm still showing up as myself.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to, we talk about someone who's early in their career, and even, we have persons that are seasoned in their career, but have never stepped out of that traditional box of conformity of what it looks like.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone? Yes, you're coming from a different background, but at the end of the day, we still have the same have to navigate the same biases and challenges. What advice would you give to that person who is saying, I spend so much time and energy shrinking myself, trying to fit into this narrative, removing layers of my culture, my experience. So you talk about being Jamaican, and it's like, yeah, we love bold colors, and that's reflected in how you show up. But here's this individual is tired of using the energy to do that, as opposed to using energy to be better in their career and, navigating, getting to higher positions and stuff like. What advice would you give that person who's like, I want to really wear that pink blazer to work, but I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't want people to say, oh, this is not a runway. Like, what advice would you give them to navigate in embracing more of themselves and being more free, letting go of some of that pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously this is a very personal decision for everyone,
Yeah.
and what that means. Depending on the space that you're in, some of us work in, whether it be tech or, finance and marketing and that sort of thing. I tend to take a lot of social cues, from the people around me, and then I build upon that based on what I like and what I love. So if I see, let's say my colleague is like, oh, okay, I noticed, okay, that's what she considers smart casual. Okay, well, I'm going to put my own spin on that, based on my personal taste,
Yeah.
and 9 times out of 10, it's always color. So if I'm going to do a dark wash jeans and, maybe let's say a white blouse or something like that, and maybe that person wears a black blazer, well, I'm going to wear a blazer with color. I'm still getting there, but that still makes me feel like I'm showing up as myself. So
Yeah.
I would say find little ways to kind of show up for yourself, because it is empowering. Some of us, it's jewelry, bold jewelry. There's that the outfit can be a bit more understated, but that great statement necklace or earrings or rings and everything like that. I have all of that. So, so you can definitely show up however you want to, but find something that is a part of that you can make a part of your style and wardrobe that really sort of signifies to yourself, this is me and this is how I show up. And I have one of my friends who her big thing is big statement necklaces. Like that's her thing. Like,
Yeah.
and they look amazing, and it works for her. So that's how she sort of kind of shows up. So if she is wearing something a little bit more understated, she's gonna get compliments on her jewelry. There's
Yeah.
nowhere around it. So find that little thing that works for you and just kill it, just show up and show out. I here, my motto is they can't kick you out if you're fabulous. Okay.
I love it. I love it. I think there's this, this idea behind, I mean, we're both coming from a Caribbean background, and I've heard, living in the US now, I've heard Black women say this, like, you get that good corporate job and you're told, put your head down, don't try to show up, don't try to take up too much room. But when you think about building your career and you think about building your brand, why would you want to be invisible? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to be invisible? Just as you said, take your cues from looking around. And if you find, and this is now I'm curious as to how you would tackle this particular scenario. Last week I was at a networking event and I met a couple of fabulous women. I remember I was talking to one woman and she was like, when in doubt, wear black. I'm like, yeah, but everybody in this room wearing black, right? How are
Right.
you going to stand out? Like, what is your purpose and reason for coming to this networking event? To be in the room or to connect and build upon the relationships that you're there? And she's sharing with me now. I was like, oh, my boss is so traditional that I never know what to wear. Like, my boss is super traditional, black pants, black blazer, white shirt.
Right.
And there's that feeling that, oh, how do I step out and be myself?
Yeah.
Now, if you're working in an environment like that, how do you bring your authentic self to that space in terms of how you're showing up and how you're dressing? What would you say?
Yeah, for sure. I think, when you're in these spaces, I think it's important to remember that we all have to be true to ourselves one way or another. When we go home at night, the person looking back in the mirror is the person that's most important. Now, I understand career wise, you want to climb the corporate ladder, you want to show up, but there's no value in being like everybody else. There really isn't. So, what does that look like for you? And you kind of have to make that distinction. I also like to remind myself that honestly, no one cares. Like, no one cares. Like, we overthink everything. And, I'm guilty of it too. But we think that people are looking at us way more than they are. People are so self absorbed for the most part as human beings. Like, they do not care. Now, if you want to stand out, especially like in a corporate environment or, at a networking event, definitely go against the grain. Like I said, if you want to wear a black dress or a skirt and a top or something like that. But, make it your own. What does that look like for you? And show up authentically in that way, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that you will find that you'll get a bigger return on showing up the way that you feel most comfortable, and basically a way to showcase who you are and bring that light into that space. Because you're right, sometimes you go to these events and my God, they're such a snooze fest,
I
you
know.
know. They're so freaking boring. Like everybody looks the same. Everybody looks, you're just like, what is everybody wearing? But I promise you, if you show up and wear something amazing, or maybe do your hair a certain way, you will stand out because you're not like everybody else. I mean, obviously you're standing out too because you're probably black or brown. There's that, you
There,
know.
yeah, there's that. But you're standing out for the right reasons.
Right.
We've been conditioned to feel as though don't standing out is a bad thing. It's like, no,
Yeah.
standing out gets you the opportunities that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because 9 times out of 10, when I go to these networking events, I'm going by myself. That's the first thing. I don't know anyone in the room. So of course I'm gonna wear color. 9 times out of 10, people are going to come up to me, people are going to engage with me, and that gives me an opportunity to say, oh, hi. Well, first, to break the ice, I don't have to deal with the awkward trying to introduce myself because
Yeah.
people are coming up to me. So I love that you just share, because that is something a lot of women struggle with, and black women struggle with. It's like, how can I show up as myself or wear what truly aligns with who I am when maybe the boss isn't, right? And you,
Right.
as you rightfully said, everybody's going to, you have to define what that looks like for you and how you want to show up and really represent yourself, because at the end of the day, that's the person that's most important. Yes, you want to climb the corporate ladder, but you shouldn't look to climb the corporate ladder, look for these opportunities at the expense of not being yourself. I think that's very important. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, as we wrap up, Trish, always wanted to, whenever I'm looking at this conversation, because I truly believe in order for us to break some of the biases, for us to change the perception of Black women, our appearance, and how we show up in the space, it starts on two levels. There's the individual level, like it's up to us to decide that we are not going to conform to these boxes
Right.
that we're placed into. And then on the other side is the collaboration from the companies and the organizations in which we're working or we volunteer in. How can you, like, what is one thing you would, um, basically, from an organizational standpoint, that they can do to make us, women of color and women, feel a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusion, that we can really and truly be and bring our authentic self into the workplace, including the way that we dress?
Yeah, I think, every organization is different, right? It just depends on where you're working and how a company has sort of, designated how you show up. In this day and age, we have hybrid work, we have people who work from home, and people who have gone back into the office, a return to the office. So it's a little different depending on the organization. But I think for most organizations, just kind of maybe not necessarily saying, hey, here is a particular dress code. Like everybody has to look, let's say business professional. But we want to make sure that, obviously people aren't, showing up, let's say
Yeah.
in shorts or something like that. But, maybe have a statement like, want to make sure that everybody, look nice, look what's comfortable for you, but we're still in an office environment, we're still in a professional space. So show up in what makes you feel good, with a professional lens, because
Yeah.
we are working.
Yeah.
So, I think having statements like that and being actually supportive to your employees and your teammates, from what I've seen so far, in most spaces that I'm in, people are typically very complimentary. But again, I know that's very different in, traditional corporate spaces where people don't really have that room. But I will say this, as an individual, we can't change the narrative if we don't push ourselves to step outside this box. Nothing's going to change if we all decide to wear black suits, with
Yeah.
a smart, shoe.
Yeah.
Jesus, you know, um, you know,
I
so
you said it's like, oh my gosh, I cringed at the thought.
yes, right.
Yeah.
So, I want to empower all of us to, continue to push that envelope, even though it's not really pushing the envelope, is really just showing up as yourself, is to dare to wear that, bright colored blazer, that floral blazer, or the pants that's bold, and you're like, oh, these are fun, but be daring, be bold, be confident to show up as yourself, because either way the world is always going to have something to say regardless, so you might as well give them something to talk about. You might as well,
And not at where you're shrinking yourself, right? I
right,
love that.
right,
Dare to wear, right?
yes,
Dare to wear.
yes,
It's this idea that, as you said, you put it so nicely, is if you want to show up differently, you must consider, for me, it's, you have to dare to wear the things and step out of the boxes that we're placed into. We also have to consider the beliefs that we hold, because this is part of the conversation that I'm having right now with style stories. It's like those beliefs that we hold and the beliefs that other people hold about us, that we need to break that narrative by simply showing up as ourselves. Because if we're holding on to those beliefs, it's not only affecting the way that we show up and show up, but it's also affecting how we show up in our career and our businesses. And
yeah,
so it's like,
absolutely.
do that work, right? Do that work to break it down, and know that every time you decide to step into your authentic self, whatever that is, and show up in a way that represents you, it's one step closer to changing the narrative. The power is in our control, absolutely in our control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I agree with you 1000%. I think that, the more of us who show up, and I think there's so many examples of women who are doing that already, especially women who have, reached at a certain point in their careers, they're VPs and CEOs and, CMOs, and they're wearing, whatever they want, the bold colors, the bold patterns, we've seen it, so I think, we can use those examples and use that to empower ourselves as we go about our careers and our personal lives, and also to build our personal brands. I will say this, for those who are just getting started in their careers and are trying to figure out, well, what do I wear, it all starts with how you shop, and I will say, look for pieces that can you can wear multiple times in terms of an event, so I make sure I have some dresses and a couple of like tops that I'm like, anywhere I'm going, I
That's
put
it.
this on, I'm good.
Yep.
I'm good.
The go-to outfit.
Exactly. Go to, so think about that when you're shopping, and, you can pop in a Target, Nordstrom Rack, all those places, even Ross, and all of those places have beautiful options that can go from event to event. But, make sure you have those statement pieces. They don't have to cost a lot, but make sure that it's versatile. That is the key, when you're trying to think of like, okay, what do I wear to this event? But you're like, hey, I feel good in this. I can wear this, to a Fortune 500 event. I can wear this to a networking event, and I still look amazing. So consider that when you are shopping, and you are building up those key pieces in your wardrobe, but also too, you want to make a statement because you want to make sure that you're constantly showing up as yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you can wear it on a Zoom or in
Yeah,
a room. I've done that with this outfit already. So, Trish, I want to thank
exactly.
you very much for joining me. I appreciate you being a part of this conversation and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your expertise. I want to thank everyone. If you're joining us live, thank you very much for being here. If you're watching the replay, thank you very much for coming back and listening to today's conversation. If we haven't connected as yet, hit that follow button here on LinkedIn. You can find Trish as well right here on LinkedIn. You can follow her, message her, and say, "Hey Trish, what's going on?" So thank you all very much for being here. Until next time, remember that representation is not just you being in the room or having a seat at the table, but it's also how you show up. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.